What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I'm your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, 31 Days of Horror Volume 8, Day 24, coming at you live and direct. Alright, so we're going to leave the US and we're going to take a trip to Eastern Europe, specifically Poland. Alright, so this is a film from 1985, and it is part of the House of Psychotic Women's Rarity Collection box set released by Severin Films. If you remember, a couple years ago on the 31 Days of Horror, I reviewed Identikit, and really just fell in love with that movie, honestly. Really cool stuff. But this one right here, I'd heard it is really, really bizarre, and I really didn't know what to expect going into this one because, honestly, the things I've heard from people were all over the place. Like, literally all over the place. Some people hated it, some people loved it, some people were in the middle. Like, it was, usually with films like this, I feel like it's one way or the other, but there was, like, middle ground. I don't know. So, anyways, yeah, so without further ado, it is called I Like Bats from 1985. Alright, so synopsis on this one. Basically, this one follows our main character, Isabella. She lives with her aunt and works in her aunt's store. Basically, they sell like little trinkets and like antiques and things like that, right? So anyways, the thing is with Isabella is that she's convinced that she's a vampire. And of course, the thing is, like, people around here just kind of be like, okay, whatever. They just kind of take it with a grain of salt, you know, kind of thing. Meanwhile, she's working in her aunt's shop. There is a bunch of killings that are happening, that are going on and stuff like that. Anyways, one specific day, there's this guy that comes into the store, and he has his eyes set on this this tea set, and it's like basically it's kind of infused with like bat art and stuff like that. It's very unique. Anyways, it turns out this guy actually is a psychiatrist that works at the local sanitarium or the mental hospital or whatever. Anyways, he buys this stuff, and you know, Isabella wants to kind of get help. She feels like she can be like cured or whatever. So she decides one day to actually check herself in to go see this guy that bought this tea set off her. And she ends up at the sanitarium, and she sits down and talks to him, and she basically tells him, she's like, I think I'm a vampire. I need help. And he's like, just kind of brushes it off. He's like, yeah, okay, whatever, and stuff like that. So, you know what? I'm just gonna stop the synopsis right there. So she checked herself in, and yeah, kind of just goes from there. So my thoughts on I Like Bats. Now, this is a really interesting film because if you go into a film like I Like Bats with a Western mind, you're probably going to be super disappointed with the overall product of this. And what I mean by this is that when you approach an Eastern European vampire film, they have different folklore. They have different rules. There's different ideologies within the vampire folklore. So that's demonstrated a lot right here. If you're expecting like a typical Dracula or any type of Western vampire film, like Near Dark or fucking, you know, Lost Boys or whatever, you're not going to get that. Like I said, the folklore is a lot different in Eastern Europe. So that is what you kind of get here. The thing I like about this film is that it mixes a lot of the Eastern European folklore with some of the Western ideologies. You know, it gets a little bit like sexualized and stuff like that. I know I'm Eastern European vampire folklore. That was never a thing. Like the sexualization of it was never a thing. In fact, the word vampire never even really specifically focused on what we think, what we look at as vampires. The walking undead that lives on blood and sucks the blood out of necks and kills people and stuff like that. That's not necessarily what the folklore suggests in Eastern European folklore, or in vampirism. Now they say there's a really good intro on this actually from the writer of the book of this, and she talks about like the history of the vampire folklore and how it actually, they figure it actually started in Serbia, which is really interesting. And she goes into like the actual word and like what it meant. They used to use the word vampire for, you know, things like ghosts and goblins and other type of creatures and stuff like that. It wasn't just what the Western world knows as a vampire, it's the undead bloodsucker kind of thing. So it meant a bunch of different things and stuff like that. So again, when you go into this movie, you have to be kind of open-minded and you have to look at it from the Eastern European folklore ideologies when you're watching this film. But like I said, it mixes the Western world in it too, which is kind of cool. But it's also given the time, because in 1985, there was an abundance of popular you know, vampire movies that came from, you know, I would say the Western world and stuff like that. Now, to me, this one comes off as like, it feels like it's going to be a little bit of artsy film, but it starts out like kind of like it's aesthetically really cool. Like it looks like old Poland and stuff like that. Aesthetics is really cool. And it has kind of like this dark kind of premonition feeling to it. But then instantly we get this character that comes into the shop who's like super goofy. And you also get like this really ridiculous like comic relief and stuff like that. And I'm like, what the hell? But then the tone shifts back to like being super serious. And we're following Isabella, and like, you know, we find out really early that she most possibly is a vampire because she's out there doing things with people and she is biting necks and people are dying. But the thing is with this movie, it's kind of bloodless. It doesn't focus on, you know, biting the neck and sucking the blood and being like, oh, you know, I'm revamped, you know, for lack of a better term. But, yeah, and like, you know, she obviously walks around in the day, doesn't have that kind of ideology and stuff like that. It doesn't have that folklore. So she is not the walking undead, but she quite possibly could be a vampire. I feel like this one lives in the vein of like a Martin. Now, Martin is one of those movies where if you've seen it before, you know, you follow this main character who is convinced he's a vampire, but he may or may not be. And it's this really cool character study, and it kind of follows a character study of her too, where, you know, we keep seeing her dispose of these men, but at the same time, the way the direction is in the film, it almost throws it at you to keep guessing if she is a vampire or not. And I really like that about this movie, man. Like I said, you know, it's got really good atmosphere, it's got really good tone, and it keeps you thinking. It's kind of a mystery, but at the same time, it's not. It's really fucking bizarre. It's a really, really bizarre film. Like, the whole tone really does switch, though, too, when she goes to the sanitarium, and she realizes that that place really isn't for her. And she ultimately tries to get out of there, but like she disposes of some dude and some guy sees it and stuff. And it's just like this really weird sequence of events and stuff like that. There's one really cool kill in this film where she actually kills a guy in a truck. And she pushes the truck down a hill, and it just, the way it's shot though, like she pushed it, it's like a stoic shot. And she gets out of the vehicle and she pushes it down a hill, and she's walking towards the frame, like the fourth wall. And it explodes in the background and she's walking towards the camera. It's fucking cool, man. It's such a great scene. Like, you know, the way it's shot is actually really nice. I really like the aesthetic, the way it's shot. It's acted really well. It's pretty much a bloodless film. Like I said, you know, if you're expecting that big gory vampire westernized ideology of vampires, you're not really going to get that in this one. It's more of a thinker, but at the same time, it's like confusing, and you keep wanting to scratch your head going, what the fuck? And then where this one goes in the third act is really, really bizarre. Like, there's a lot of moving parts in this film too. Like, there's a guy that's like overly obsessed with her and stuff. She wants nothing to do with him. But then, you know, she has this kind of thing with the doctor, and oh man, there's so many like bizarre things. But in the third act where it goes, like, I actually started laughing out loud going, holy shit, like, I can't tell if this movie was meant to be a dark comedy or a horror film that has things in it that are not supposed to be funny, but they're coming across as being really funny. Obviously, there's some comic relief that's meant there to be a little bit funny, but the end result, like, I don't know. I'd like, if anyone's seen this movie, let me know your thoughts on the third act. Like, the whole scene, the whole experimental scene, I'm just gonna say at the end of this film, had me fucking roaring, man. I was like, what the hell am I watching? Like, it goes into a place where you never expect it to go. It's super, super bizarre. And then after that, we get this really weird reveal at the end of the film too, that kind of like sums up where this film probably had you thinking in the first place, or maybe not. It's really interesting. It does have like this kind of dream atmosphere at times to it, mixed with this really forebodingly odd score, which I actually really like the music in the movie too. It feels appropriate for the way it's shot and just how old the Polish lands are and stuff. It's really cool. But yeah, like, really, honestly, a bizarre tonal film. Like, and don't get me wrong, it's not overly goofy. I'm not trying to say it just has these weird comedic moments, and actually the character that's kind of doing the comic relief, there's a really funny moment in this film, which is probably not meant to be super funny, but I actually laughed out loud, and it's kind of like the demise of him, and it made me laugh to the point where I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's just the Polish humor. It's that super dark, and it was meant to be funny, but I pissed myself. I was like, that is funny ass shit. So, I mean, all in all, is it a vampire film? Sure. Is it not? Sure. I mean, it is what you want it to be, but I'm not going to tell you specifically what it is or what it isn't, but I highly suggest this. In fact, everything in this box set is really good. Identikit is fucking amazing. Footprints on the Moon, I absolutely love. The only one I haven't seen is The Other Side of the Underneath. I haven't seen that one yet, but I love Footprints on the Moon. I love this movie too. Identikit is amazing. I think that's one of the best films I've seen in the last few years, like kind of gems that I found. So if I have to rate this one, I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I think it's definitely worthy of your time. If you're into these type of movies, and it really does fit the whole geographical concept of this box set. Like, it fits in absolutely perfectly. So the author of the book of House of Psychotic Women, she, like I said, she does an intro. And she actually found this movie by accident. She was looking up something else on the internet, came across a picture of this, and she's like, what the hell is this? She said it led her down a rabbit hole, and she's like, oh shit, discovered this one. And but I do agree, she actually does mention about like how it has this really kind of goofy elements to it, and I'm like, no shit, it really does, because it feels like it shouldn't. It's really interesting. But it's very surreal. I really like this. You know, again, go into it with an open mind. Just keep in mind it's morally focused on the Eastern European folklore, the ideologies of vampirism, more than the Western, even though it does incorporate, like, you know, stuff like sexualizing vampires and stuff like that. There's a really funny scene actually where the guy asked her like why she's there, and she totally lies to him, and she says, I'm a nymphomaniac. And then he's like, he just kind of reacts like, yeah, right. I was like, well, that's pretty interesting to be a nymphomaniac and be in here. Then she's like walking somewhere, and she sees this guy like banging this nurse, and I'm like, oh my god, it's just, it's funny. It's funny. But anyways, I like Bats. Highly recommend this one. I thought it was really cool. Like I said, man, I get why people wouldn't like it, but I think if you just understand the differences in the folklore, you know, it might come out a little bit better. But and I'm not directly comparing it to Martin, but it definitely has that type of character study feel, like one way or the other. So, but maybe I kind of am. I don't know. It is what it is. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for here for day 24. I'll be back tomorrow, day 25, with another review. Check you guys later. And as usual,